Now, I absolutely love running on those lovely crisp winter mornings like today, but I have to admit, I do feel like my training takes a bit of a hit when I'm training in the cold. For starters, I just struggle to get out of the house. That's understandable. Once I am out of the house, I just feel like I can't do my workouts as well in the cold. My power on the bike drops, I just can't hit the same pace as on the run. Now, I've always blamed that on the cold, but why and what is actually happening? Now, before we even talk about the cold itself, we need to actually take a step back and look at some very basic biology, because our bodies do a very impressive job of regulating our core body temperature by either increasing or decreasing heat loss or heat production to make sure our bodies don't overheat or get too cold. Of course, as we exercise, we create heat from our active muscles, and that heat is then transferred to our skin and to our core. And the longer the exercise, or the more intense the exercise, the more heat is produced, which is pretty obvious stuff, really. So even if you do start out in the cold and feeling rather cold, it's likely you're going to warm up with time. And any excess heat that is produced, our body tries to get rid of through sweat and through our breath and so on. But back to the original question, why do I struggle to train in the cold? Well, as the mercury really does drop, our body understandably works harder to keep our vital organs warm. And that means it shunts blood away from our extremities, meaning less blood, less oxygen to our muscles. Another thing that happens is that our blood vessels constrict in the cold to help maintain this core temperature. But obviously this reduces blood flow. On top of that, our nerves transmit signals slower in the cold, meaning our muscles may not contract and react as effectively as usual. Now, this all sounds very worrying, but actually in most cases, as we exercise, our muscles warm up, as I've mentioned already, so we can perform quite well in the cold. And actually just small fluctuations in our core body temperature also make very little difference either. So what are we all complaining about? Well, it's when the mercury drops below 10 degrees Celsius is when we start to see some significant negative effects. And actually, any kind of significant wind can also make it feel a lot colder than the temperature actually is. Now, one of the big effects of training in these kind of temperatures, which I hadn't really thought about, is the fact that our body tries to warm this cold air that we're breathing in before it hits our lungs. Now, that's an extra process. That's going to slow things down and divert energy away. And of course, one of the other things that we're going to experience from training in these kind of temperatures is that our body may not feel quite as fluid or limber. Now, I know personally, I tense up a little bit. I tend to shrug my shoulders. I don't feel like I can breathe quite so well, partly because I am tensing up so much. And this even happens for me above 10 degrees Celsius. And this also can have a knock-on effect to us psychologically. I mean, picture yourself heading out for a run and shivering and being very cold in the first 5 to 10 minutes of your warm-up. That's hardly getting you in the mindset and ready to do a hard workout, is it? However, much of the research suggests that it's not actually the cold that slows us down so much, more the byproducts of the cold. For instance, we all layer up in the cold to try and keep our bodies warm, at least hopefully we do. And that, when we're cycling and running, can create drag simply by having these extra bulkier layers on that may flap around as well. And then also there's the added weight of those extra layers and just a general feeling that we may not be able to move as freely as we ordinarily would in just a simple shorts and t-shirt. We often used to joke about the curse of the long bib tights, because when we put them on, we just wouldn't feel that good in them. But if you don't layer up, or maybe worse, you got caught in a cold rainstorm, or you just simply stop during a ride or a run, you will begin to cool down. You may start to experience some of these issues that I mentioned before. Or you may even get to a point of getting so cold that your body tries to create warmth by rapidly contracting your muscles. So essentially shivering. And that can actually reduce the blood flow to those muscles, which in turn is going to reduce our performance, which obviously is taking things to another level, which I've experienced, and I can't say it's much fun. Now, there is also something else that the cold does to us that honestly I had no idea about. If we do allow ourselves to get rather cold, as I just mentioned, it can cause our muscles to empty their glycogen stores at 5 to 6 times their normal rate, and also an increased level of a hormone that stimulates glycogen breakdown, which kind of makes sense. I remember numerous bike rides in which I have been very cold to the bone and felt like I was going to bonk due to a sudden and unexpected lack of energy. Now, the positive to this, I guess, and I am clutching at straws a little bit here, is that this high level of glycogen consumption can quite often leave your muscle glycogen stores completely depleted, and therefore your body then looking to fat as a source of energy. Now, if you're someone that's looking to improve your fat metabolism, well, this could be of benefit. Personally though, I'd say that bordering on hypothermia to try and achieve this is probably not the best advice. Now, of course, there are obviously a number of dangers and traps that you can fall into with cold weather exercise. One that is quite common and very easy to fall into the trap of doing is that when it's cold, we layer up to try and keep warm. And as we start to warm up, we may start to sweat and perspire. So over time, your clothes absorb this sweat, the moisture, and can become quite saturated. Now, the problem with this is that water is a great conductor of heat. In fact, 25 times faster at conducting heat from our body than air. So if you were to carry on working hard during your workout or your ride, your run, whatever, then that's absolutely fine. But if you start to slow down, you become fatigued or maybe even stop, well, you could find yourself in trouble. So let's run through some tips for you to take forward when working out and doing exercise in the cold. So tip one, depending on the activity and therefore our moving speed will depend on how much clothing you should wear, but anything under freezing, and you most certainly should be wearing a hat and gloves whilst exercising, even a hat underneath your helmet, and also some thermal insulating layers. Tip two, adaptable clothing is a winner in my opinion. So anything where you can maybe remove the sleeves and whatnot, or you just layer in a way that you can remove them as you go. For instance, I quite often like to wear an extra layer for my warm up and warm down that I can remove for the main set. You can also think about doing the first half of your workout into a headwind, and then the second half, once you're sweaty, wet, and perhaps rather fatigued and slowing down, with the wind behind you. That way you can just reduce that wind chill effect when you are cold, wet, and potentially slowing down. Tip four, make sure that you keep drinking and taking fluid on, because you will still be perspiring and sweating even in the cold. And I do appreciate that taking cold fluid on when you're already rather cold is probably the last thing you want to do, but it is really important. Now, if you are struggling with that, then some workarounds are to take a load of fluid on before you head out to work out, and then have some electrolytes in the drink that you are having when you're working out, so whatever you do manage to take on, it's the most benefit. And then when you get in, try to have some warm fluids because it's slightly more appealing. And tip five, and actually a number of tips to finish off with here. Firstly, make sure that you eat plenty. With the potential to use our glycogen stores at an increased rate, it's really important that you go in well stocked up prior to your exercise, and also you go prepared if you are going for a sustained period of time, just in case you do go through your glycogen stores quicker. Also think about the location that you're training in. Maybe try to go for something slightly less exposed to the elements, or maybe if you're really lucky, under some shelter. And also make sure that you stay safe. The cold weather and conditions tend to come hand in hand with snow, ice, and the wet roads and conditions. So make sure that you're using the right footwear and tires or equipment for those conditions. There we go, there's a lot of information there for you, and that is why a lot of us do struggle to train well in the cold conditions. If you do yourself and you've got a lot of experience in here, then please do drop any suggestions in the comment section down below, or any reasons why you think you might struggle that I haven't mentioned today. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up, give it a like. Don't forget to give us a follow over on social media and subscribe just down below.